Lozano, founder and managing editor of Waterbury Press. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to another virtual meet and greet. Our guest tonight is Steve Zimcosky, award-winning author of the Polish Dragon PI series and several other young adult mysteries. Let's welcome Steve without further ado and hear directly from him about his achievements to date and his plans for the future. He is in the waiting room, so let me bring him right up. All right. He should be joining us shortly. Okay, there is Steve. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Oh, and there you are. We've got audio too. Excellent. Well, welcome and thank you so much for sharing the disappearance of Marty McRory with us. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. Your support to our efforts are greatly appreciated.
You are quite welcome.
My pleasure to have you here. I know from your bio at our featured lit page that you were born in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was thinking that maybe we can start there and you can clue us in as to what happened between then and now.
Sure. I grew up in a small neighborhood in southeast Cleveland called Slavic Village. It was an old Polish neighborhood. It was very interesting growing up. A lot of times we would play out in the streets and there were a lot of people that just knew who you were. Your parents knew all the neighbors. You could find a Polish meat market almost on every corner or a supermarket on just about every corner. So if you needed something, like you ran out of milk, you could run around the block and you didn't have to go to the supermarket. You go to the small store, pick up some milk, or you can pick up a lot of things that were necessary back then. And we went to a Catholic elementary school, St. Stanislaus, and we went to public high school, South High, which is no longer there. But we grew up in the neighborhood. We have a lot of friends in the neighborhood because there were a lot of kids there. It was a lot of fun. We'd play kickball in the street, baseball, football. So we grew up, and there were 7 of us in my family. So I have my brothers and my sisters. We'd play, we'd hang out together. There were a lot of things that we did. My brother and I would, when we were younger, we'd collect pop bottles and cash them in for candy because it was, everybody was doing it. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And then after high school, I was in and out of college here and there, learning different things, trying different jobs, and eventually got married, had 2 wonderful daughters. Both of them are doing very well. My youngest one is in Knoxville, Tennessee. She's a licensed professional counselor. My oldest daughter, she lives here in Northeast Ohio, and she's an assistant prosecutor at one of the county prosecutor's offices. So she has fulfilled her dream of becoming a lawyer, and she's doing very well. And with her, I actually included her in one of my books. I kind of modeled the character after her as a prosecutor. So she kind of enjoyed that. So I was glad that I was able to do that for her. But I went to, I got married. I worked in a factory for like 30 years. Studied massage therapy. I ended up getting divorced, remarried, and I have a wonderful wife. But, after 30 years in the factory, I decided to quit to teach massage therapy and I'd go on from there. But as, growing up, it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of kids in the neighborhood that I still remember, that I still stay in touch with, and that I went to high school with, that I'm still in touch with. And it's really fun. And growing up in the neighborhood, there were so many friends of ours that a lot of times what I'll try to do is I'll add some of those people as characters in my books. I may maybe use their first name, but kind of like to pay homage to them for growing up and having all these friends.
So revenge?
Yeah, if need be, yes. But and it's like growing up, there were 14 brothers and sisters in my dad's family, so I've got a lot of cousins.
That's a big.
And if I plan on including them in the books, I've got a lot of writing to do if I want to kind of pay them a little bit of homage. So
let me ask you this. It sounds like the the neighborhood that you grew up in was very influential to you. Is that at around the same time when the idea of becoming a writer began to circulate in your mind, or when did you realize that you would be writing books at some point in your life?
It was always in the back of my mind, but in elementary school, we would get these things to take home. Like it was almost like I don't know how you would describe it, but you could order books through this company.
Okay.
And I would order a couple books to read, like White Fang and things like that. And I would just start reading them. And the more books I get, the more I would read. And it was like I would just get lost in the stories and thought how cool it would be to just, be able to write. So on and off throughout elementary school and high school, I had always kind of dabbled in the back of my mind about becoming a writer. And it just never really materialized at that point in my life until about maybe 10 years ago, 7 to 10 years ago.
Oh.
That's when it really materialized. So,
and what had happened 7 or 10 years ago that you were able to focus on the or to indulge in your writing?
well, I teach Tai Chi and Qigong at several of the local colleges and fitness centers. And I was teaching a Tai Chi class at the local community college. And after class, one of the women who was an assistant professor of English there, she suggested, hey, you should really write a book on Qigong and Tai Chi. I think you could really do a good job. And I thought to myself, well, it would be a little difficult because there's so many out there, and how many people are going to want another instructional book on Tai Chi and Qigong? So I thought about it, and it was kind of getting a little frustrated, thinking it would be a little hard. I'd have to hire a photographer. I'd have to break down all the pictures. It seemed like a lot of work. And then it suddenly popped into my head, why not just make it into like a story? So I would put the exercises in a story format so that people could learn as they were reading the story. And I kind of based it on a little bit of my childhood where every now and then I would get sick before going to school. And so I would think of me being a sick child, how wonderful it would have been to find somebody who could teach me Tai Chi and Qigong to help me stay healthy in my younger days. So I created a story around a young boy who would get sick and then would have to go to spend the summers with his grandparents because they lived in a rural town of Smock, which is south of Pittsburgh. And they would kind of keep him out there for the fresh air and all of those things. And he ends up meeting this old Chinese man that lives on his grandparents' property, who is a Tai Chi and Qigong master. And he befriends this man, and he teaches him how to stay healthy, how to eat properly, using the right diet and the exercises and breathing. And so I would include the exercises I taught in classes, I would include them in my book. And I would get my son at the time, he would draw the little boy for me doing the exercises so that I could put him in the book. And it turned out pretty good. So, and I ended up writing 4 little short stories for that whole series, The Old Man in the Hill.
The Old Man in the Hill. Now, you've not let me have that one at Waterbury Press, but right now that series of 4 is available
on Amazon.
At Amazon. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe you can order some of them through Barnes and Nobles as well.
Oh,
so,
okay. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Now, so that's 4 books in that series.
Yes.
Okay. How long did it take you to do? Let's start with the first one, because usually the first one is the toughest.
Yes.
It's like there's a learning curve involved. So
absolutely. It took me a while because trying to figure out which exercises to put where, which drawings to go with it, and how to make the story flow, how to include the Chinese medicine as part of the storyline, and trying to hook up with my stepson to get the drawings together. And it was just it took a long time for me because it was my first one. And even though it was a short story, it seemed like it was taking forever. But when it all came together, it turned out to be pretty good.
So tell us a little bit about your process when you're writing. I mean, I tend to write novels, and there's usually, lots of chapters. So I tend to do either a synopsis that helps me, kind of summarize from the beginning to end, so that I can know where I've started and where I'm going with the story. Or I'll do a chapter outline, and it's basically bullet points of what I need to accomplish in each chapter. And then when the writing begins, then I'll flesh out that synopsis by paragraph, or flesh out those bullet points.
Right.
But with your books being more short stories, how do you approach them?
I kind of write by the seat of my pants. It's kind of interesting because I'll have an idea. So like with the first book, The Old Man on the Hill, I just had a story idea in my head and how to put it together. And I would start, and things just seemed to pop into my head as I would go along. And so it kind of, with it being such a short book, it made it a little bit easier to kind of write the storyline because there wasn't a lot to it. But it just, and as I progress with each successive book that I write, it seems like the idea pops into my head, and then I'll kind of ruminate it in my brain for a while and let it kind of, ferment a little bit. And then I'll start getting an idea of how I want the story to flow. And so I'll just start writing. And if I end up hitting a snag, I'll stop, I'll take a walk in the park, I'll pace in the apartment until something pops into my head, or I'll just put it aside for a few days, because since I'm an independently published author, I don't have to worry about a deadline. So there's no rush to have to hurry up and get the book done. So I'll take my time, and it may take 2 or 3 days before I get back to it and start writing again. Things start to flow, things start to pop into my head. And if I hit another snag, I just stop, take a walk, and it just seems to work well for me without having to do all the outlining. I may write down on a piece of paper like an overall theme of what I want to do. And if I start putting names in and characters, I'll start writing them down on a piece of paper to make sure that it's consistent throughout the story.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's similar to what I do too. I mean, it's like when I'm working on a project, I have like these enormous timelines. Like the last book that I wrote, My Love and Homegrown Magic, I had 70 years worth of the story. And so since it was based on some actual events, then it was important that I get the timeline correct. And so I had like all these scribbles with, okay, here's where my character was born, and this is where we're going to end. 70 years, and these are the key things that happened in 1950 something. And
yes.
So
I think it's easier for me because my stories generally are taking place within a matter of weeks or months. So I don't have to go way out into like 70 years down the road and figure something out. They generally happen within a few weeks or a few months. And then it's like, so with the Old Man from the Hill series, it's usually the summer months where he's there, he's learning, he comes back home, and then the story picks up again the following summer when he has to go back. And so it's a continuation, but it's only a few months at a time. It's not like years and years and years. So it makes it easier for me to write the story that way.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned earlier that you pay homage to the people who were part of your childhood,
Yes.
places in your neighborhood and things like that. When you're developing your characters, besides the people you're paying homage to, do you find that you put yourself into characters in the book? Do you identify with a specific character, or do you put a little bit of yourself in all of them, protagonist, antagonist?
I usually put a little bit of myself in probably the main character and maybe some minor characters, but not too much. Usually with the other people, the other characters, if I want to pay homage to like a friend or a cousin or an aunt or an uncle, I'll use their first name, but change the last name for the story. And the most recent one I did, the Arc of Healers, the Polish Dragon PI, I actually modeled several of the characters after some people I know. So I actually went and asked them permission if I could actually model the person after them, because I didn't want to do it and they would start reading the book and go, hey, that's me. And it's just like, it's like, so this way, at least I have their permission that they're allowing me to do it, and they know that they're going to be kind of in the book. It may not have the same name, but they know by reading that that's them. So I want to make sure I get their permission. But a lot of it is if I'll use a family name or somebody that I have in mind, a friend, a cousin, or somebody who may have passed away that I want to put in a book, I'll use their name as part of a character line. So.
Mhm. Well, when I go through my my character creation process, um, I'm so into the supernatural that a lot of times what I focus on are personality traits. And I know that again, with the last book that I released, it was all astrology for me. So I was focusing a lot of the, like the characters in the book, when their birthdays are, because
Oh, okay.
they're real characters that in fictional circumstances, right? And
Right.
so I was thinking, okay, I'm paying homage to these real people, and it's like, okay, this one was born in May, she was a Gemini, and these are her personality traits, and that's what I'm going to try to put through in the
Yeah.
so I mean, we all kind of have our tricks that we do when we're writing,
Yes.
in our writing process. Now, when you've written your story, when you have that first draft, where do you go from there? Because there's so many things that need to happen before you are actually holding a book in your hand, right?
Right. Yes. What I'll do is after the first draft, I have a group of beta readers I'll send it out to. Some of my cousins who are willing to do it for me. A few of my students that I teach Tai Chi and Qigong to, they will read it for me and they will give me back feedback on what they like about the book, what they don't like about the book. And it's really helpful for me before I send it to the editor, because this way I know if I need to make changes in certain areas. And a lot of times it's like they really like the storyline, maybe change this, maybe change that. And I always tell them when I send it to them, I said, remember, this is unedited, so you have to keep that in mind, because if you're going to start picking apart my grammar and punctuation, it's like it hasn't been edited yet. So just tell me about the story, how it flows, and things of that nature. My one cousin, Norma, she had responded once with, I love how you always put a little piece of yourself in each of your stories. So I try to add a little bit of my own personal life within the stories to make them memorable for me, so that I know where they're going. And then once I get feedback from the people, then I'll send it off to the editor if I don't have to make any changes. And then I'll let the editor go through it and make those changes that need to be done. And then I'll start working on it again.
Boy, I mean, I tell you, the editors, they can be angels or they can be demons.
Yes.
They are definitely a necessary part
Yes.
of the entire process. Now, I know that while all that's happening, and at least this is part of my process, right? That once I've got my first draft completed and it's on its way to beta readers and everything, I've already started working on the design for the cover. Do you do something similar, or I mean, do you have things happening simultaneously so that it
Yes,
all?
yes. Usually what happened is once I have an idea, in the first few books that I did, my stepson did the covers for me and some of the drawings. But when him and his wife moved to New York City with their jobs, he got a little too busy and couldn't do it. And then they started their food blog, which will come into play later in my latest book. But so I try to get them to do things at the same time so that I can incorporate it when I do send it to the editor, that he has everything, the cover, the pictures, the drawings, whatever it may be, so that he gets an idea of how the story flows as well. So, but it's usually, yeah, it's kind of one of those things that I try to do. The most recent book I did, The Polish Dragon, The Lineage Sword, I actually knew what I wanted on the cover before I ever started writing the story. And I had my artist do that right away so that I could just write the book because I already knew what I wanted. And she was really fantastic. She's a great artist. I found her. I can't remember exactly how I found her. She's in Serbia, and her name is Andrea Ivetic Vikai, and she does really great artwork. And I love that she does. She goes by the name Ergo Schwampi, and she does a lot of great work for me. Some of the books I actually had drawings inside, but the most recent ones, it's mostly been just the cover that she does for me, and it's really fantastic. She does really great artwork. So it's like I am so blessed that I was able to find her, and she does a really good job.
Excellent. Yeah, I know. I started working um, with a new graphic designer, and it's a team that I found through LinkedIn. They're called Nibble Art, and I couldn't be more pleased with the way that they work. They're in the Ukraine, and so I was a little skittish about it because I was thinking, oh my gosh, all the time zones and this and that. But oh my gosh, I couldn't have hoped for a more professional group of people.
Right.
I'm so pleased with the speed at which they work and the quality of the work that they do. I was so thrilled with how my cover turned out for my last book. So I think that as independents, it's invaluable to have a list of resources, and that's one of the things that I've been doing with Waterbearer Press is to try to put together that list of tried and true resources. And it includes beta readers, editors, graphic designers, other authors, and I think they're all worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely, yes, yes. Especially the beta readers, because you get instant feedback from them, and that's what, for me as a writer, I really need that.
Well, exactly, because a beta reader is basically the audience that you're writing for, and
right.
So you want them to love the story, but be able to tell you, oh, you know what, you kind of lost my interest from here to there. And you're like, okay, no, I need to fix that. But so yeah, I think that beta readers are probably, because they're not professional editors, they're not authors. So they're basically evaluating the sheer entertainment value that you're providing, and that's why I think that they're critical. And the thing that's important is to find the ones that are interested in your genre, in what you're writing, right?
Yes. And the other thing too is when you get that honest feedback from them, it's like, I didn't really like this book too much this time. Your other one was better. This one just, or I didn't like this part of the book, or it just didn't ring true with me, or things like that. And that's the kind of honest feedback I prefer to have, so that I understand what people really want, rather than, oh, it was great, I loved it, and it's like every time I give you a book, you say, oh, great, I love it. You have to give me some kind of honest feedback so that I know if I'm doing a good job or not. One of my students, she's one of my beta readers, and she helps me out. And she told me, she goes, you're a great storyteller, but you have to do certain things, this and that. And it's like, you may need to do this, or and she'll go through there. And she's almost like a freelance editor for me, because she'll start, you got to do this, you got to do that, and she'll correct punctuation. And it's like, so she helps me out more ways than just by being a beta reader, but it's like she's really honest and blunt, right to the point, and that's what I appreciate.
Yeah, don't lose that contact card.
No.
So how many books do you have in your catalog?
I have 17, and I'm working on 18. I just started 18.
Goodness.
Yes.
And 18 is the sword one?
No, that's 17.
Okay.
Yeah, I just started on this one. This one's going to be kind of like paying homage to my former coworkers that I worked at a factory for 30 years. It's going to be an interesting
factory.
A material handling equipment.
Okay.
And they made overhead cranes.
Oh.
So right now the working title is the Polish Dragon Midnight Crane. And I'm not going to give much more because in case they see the interview, I don't want them, they're going to have to read the story first. So, they're already asking questions like who's going to die and who did this and who did that. And it's just like, so I'm getting them interested already, before I ever finish writing the story. So it's fun. And the most recent one takes place in Taiwan. It takes place partially in the United States and partially in Taiwan and partially in China. So there's some historic tidbits that I threw in there about the first king emperor and a city in Taiwan called Yufen, which is where I got the city from, was from my stepson and daughter-in-law. They have their food blog called Nam Life. And so they took a trip there, and it's like they have all these pictures and descriptions of the place. And I thought, this would be great to work a story around. And I asked them if I could use their pictures and the descriptions, which they gave me permission to do. And it's a wonderful place, and I included it in the story. It used to be an old gold mining town where at one point things were leaking out into the water, and there was a place called the Gold Waterfalls because the gold would seep into the water and it would all just come down and it looked like a golden waterfall. And it's really fantastic. So it's really a nice place. So they allowed me to use that as part of the storyline, and I'm very grateful for them.
Excellent, excellent. It's always important to write what you know.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
So now the Polish dragon, where is he based at?
He's based out of Southeast Cleveland, in one of the suburbs. So he has an office there, retired from the Cleveland Police Department, and decided to open his own private investigation office. And it takes him on all these little adventures, these cases that he has to work to solve that people are calling him to get help with. So it's kind of interesting. And then I picked the name Polish Dragon because of when I was competing in martial arts back in the 70s. It was the Bruce Lee craze, and everybody was watching Bruce Lee, and he was known as the little dragon. And I thought, well, why not create a character called the Polish Dragon? And he has a martial arts background, so it was kind of fun to create the character, and I really enjoy it. So and then it's just like more ideas started popping into my head, and it's turning into a series. So I'm really grateful for that.
Excellent, excellent. Now, as an independent author, I mean, it's an uphill climb. I'm sure you know.
Yes.
When you had your first book out, or when you finished your first book and you decided to go the independent route, what kind of unexpected stumbling blocks did you run into? I mean, I know that we all have our disappointments. Things don't work out the way that we think they should or wish they would. But what kind of stumbling blocks have you faced along the way?
With my first book, it was the idea that I thought maybe I could get a publisher to publish it. And it was the rejection letters that kind of, we're not interested. It's not the kind of story we're looking for. And so it's kind of like a little bit of a setback. It's like, what do I do now? And I contacted my editor and asked him if he knew of any publishers. And he says, why not self-publish it? Amazon has it now where you can self-publish your books through Amazon. So I thought, okay, well, I'll give that a try. And he gave me the information, and I set up an account. And then it was like, that was another, it's like, wow, this is really, it's like, you got to do this, you have to do that. And at the time, it's like, I don't even know what a PDF is. And it's like you're trying to figure this out, and you're asking people for help. And it's like, wow, is this really, you ask yourself, is it really worth it to go through all this? But then once you learn the process of how to do the self-publishing through Amazon, each successive book becomes easier and easier to do it. The first one took me probably about a whole week after trying to figure out how to do all this and add that to now where I can do it within a day or two, and I can just have everything downloaded.
You went from the Old Man in the Hill to the Polish Dragon of publishing.
Yes, yes, yes. and a few other different books in between, a couple sci-fi and some supernatural books, but short stories, no novelettes they call them. They're really short stories.
Yeah.
But successive ones seems to get longer, and my writing seems to get better with each successive book that I write too.
Hey,
And
I
it's the
mean,
experience which helps.
exactly. I mean, it's the experience. I know that the first time that I went, with the self-publishing thing, yeah, it just, it's mind-boggling, all the things that are entailed just with the process of getting something from your computer to mass distribution.
Yes.
It's crazy. But then one of the other, and I mean, I know that for me, one of the more difficult things to square away with as an independent is the marketing effort.
Right.
It's just when you make that choice to go independent as opposed to the traditional publishing, you're not really realizing what the traditional publishing has in its corner.
Right.
You know what I
Yes.
mean, when it comes
Oh, yeah.
to a punch with
Yeah.
marketing and that kind of a thing. And so I think that when that realization hits you, then that's where I would think that a lot of people might just kind of go, it's like, okay, forget it, this is not for me. And then there's some of us who kind of stand on principle, like, well, I'm not going to give up.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. I felt the same way. It's like, oh my God, I got to do my own advertising now. It's just like, where do I even begin? And it's like, so luckily for me, I have some family members or friends who have studied marketing, and they'll give me a little bit of advice. And it's like, you learn where you should be marketing your book and where you should be advertising. And it's like, a lot of times you don't want to put big ads in newspapers because they're not really, one of the best things is to have interviews like this,
Yeah.
where you can share them on YouTube or with family and friends, or newspaper interviews. I've done 2 or 3 of those already. And that helps to get your name out there because people see it, especially in the local newspapers. And word of mouth advertising, the more people enjoy your book, the more you hope they tell other people about them and say, hey, I just read this good book by this great author. You should really get it and read it. It's, you can buy it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles. It's like, he's really a great author. So, things like that. And it's just, yeah.
And just continue on our uphill battle. That's all that we can do as independents anymore.
Right.
I know that up until 2019 or the spring of 2020, there were in-person events in my calendar and things that I hang out at a local Barnes and Noble or go to an independent bookshop and sit there for a few hours. But now all of that is gone, and in a way, I think it's kind of a blessing.
Yes.
Because for independents, who, I mean, a lot of times when there are book festivals or that kind of a thing, you can't afford the prime locations at a conference venue or something like that. So when you can go virtual and all of a sudden you can be on a YouTube channel or something like that,
yes,
then it's like, wow, that's a fantastic tool.
right, exactly.
That it's important to capitalize on that, and so here we are.
Right. Or I'll ask my doctor or dentist if I could leave some in the waiting room so that other patients can read them and maybe get hooked on them and say, hey, I got to buy some more of this author's book and things like that. And that really helped. The other thing I did too was I had bookmarks made. I had the artist I used. She created a bookmark for me with my Amazon website on it. So what I'll do is I'll leave them at bookstores. I'll leave them at the library. I just leave them all over. So my information is on that bookmark so that if they decide they want to look, they can look me up and see my books.
And you know what I do? I'll leave my bookmarks at the airport bookshops.
Yeah,
I'll
sure.
stuck them in there with the J.K. Rowlings or the Stephen Kings and
Yes, yeah, right. Yes, yes. Wherever people want to get a bookmark from, because a lot of times they may lose one and say, "Oh, here's another bookmark," and it really works. And as long as you have your information on there, that's advertising, and it's not an expensive way of doing it. It's
right, right,
so
right. Now, so with the whole pandemic thing, I mean, well, hopefully now that that vaccinations are starting to roll out, or hopefully things will begin to ease up. But I think that what I'm seeing is that things are not gonna necessarily revert back to exactly the way that they were. I think that there's a lot of businesses who went remote and are probably gonna stay remote
right.
even once things are opened up. And I'm thinking that virtual events like this, I think are gonna continue to grow. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to do several more of these, maybe focusing on specific books. Certainly when your 18th book comes out, I'm hoping that we can work with you on a launch party or something.
Sure.
My last
I would,
book was supposed to be an in-person event, but come Halloween 2020, the venue
yes,
canceled, and understandably so. I mean, we'd already reduced the the amount of people that were going to be there to 25, and they said no. The city said we can't do even 25. We have to close down. So it ended up being a virtual event, my first one ever, and a book launch. I mean, all my other book launches have been at bookstores and things like
right.
that. So it was kind of a letdown, but at the same time, it was exhilarating because it turned out so well,
Yes,
and the expense was minimal.
right.
So
Exactly.
anyways, well, I'm hoping that we will continue to do this, continue to grow, because
Yes.
the idea is to continue betting on one another as independents, supporting one another, and promoting our work. And I think that this is an excellent way to do that. So with that said, I wanna thank you again so much, Steve, for first of all for participating in our program with Waterbury Press for the Indie Spotlight, and for agreeing to participate in this interview. I love getting to know you a little bit more, and like I said, I hope that we can do more interviews and book signings in the weeks to come.
I thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it, and I would love to do it again. Maybe with the next book or whenever. It's just like I just enjoy it. It's fun, and I'm very grateful that you had me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, and so I think that we will go ahead and say good night now, and
Okay.
good night.